Welcome to the Immigrant Finance Podcast, a show dedicated to everything money, online business, and immigration, because immigrant families deserve to build generational wealth too. I'm your host, Adina, social entrepreneur, an immigration attorney, and financial educator and coach for immigrant families. I created the Immigrant Finance platform with my husband Mauricio, who immigrated to the US 8 years ago after we struggled through the whole process of trying to figure out finances as an immigrant family alone. We wanted to share what we learned about building wealth with others along the way and created the Immigrant Finance School Group Coaching Program, where we teach immigrants and their families like you how to manage their money, get started investing, and build online businesses in just weeks, all with group accountability and support. Our clients have been able to get started investing and develop lifelong plans to build generational wealth regardless of their immigration status, actually launched an online business they've been dreaming of starting for years, bring in enough income to leave a job with a shitty boss, and book up their calendar for the rest of the month just after announcing their new coaching business. I'm coming to you with a new show several times a week with stories about online business lessons, money and mindset insights, and guest interviews to help you become financially empowered. Each episode will switch between personal finance and online business topics. Now let's get to this week's episode. Greetings, everyone. This is Adina from Immigrant Finance, and I'm here today with our guest, Everyday Finance Gal, who's going to be speaking to us about finances, her experience, in the immigration space, and her great knowledge on finances. And we're also going to talk a little bit about motherhood and money. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Adina, for having me. I'm so excited to talk to the immigrant finance community. I love your podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I'll turn it over to you if you want to introduce yourself a little bit to everybody.
Sure. I go by Everyday Finance Gal on Instagram. And basically, the premise of my page is sharing money moves, digestible money moves for the everyday person. And I think my main intent is to serve single women and moms as they grow to create generational wealth. As an immigrant here, I was born in Eastern Europe, which we'll probably get into. My parents started from zero when they came here. So a lot of what we had to learn was through just living here and not passed down by generational wealth. So that's kind of my goal for my daughter, to pass down assets to her. And so that's the premise of my page and the goal of my page.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear more. I come from an Eastern European family as well, a couple of generations back, so who also had that experience. So I can't wait to hear more about your story. We can go ahead and jump in. Yeah. So let's just get started. Whatever you feel comfortable sharing about your experience immigrating here.
Sure. I was 4. We moved here in March of 91. So I turned 5 right as we moved here. My parents, my grandparents, my great grandma, and me flew from Eastern Europe or Armenia with nothing really to our name. So immigration for us was in pursuit of a better place. Armenia was part of the Soviet Union and they had just declared independence. So there was a lot of need to move away for a better life. And so at that time, the gates were open to come to America. So that's kind of everyone's dream at that point. And back then, I don't know if this relates to your community here, it's you kind of have to have a sponsor in order to move here. So we had a sponsor, a sibling of one of my parents sponsored us. And then just coming here, you had to live here, right, for a couple of years before you can get U.S. citizenship status. So we didn't speak English. We had $5,000 of debt to kind of help us get an apartment. My parents had to start from scratch. So it was a really humbling experience now that I think about it for them, because they're my age. And so right now thinking about moving to a completely new country that I don't speak the language, I don't know my way around. I don't know how the DMV works to get a car, right? Mm-hmm. It just blows my mind on their perseverance and their just sheer faith in the Lord, and kind of getting here with high hopes of making a better life for us. So for me, it's trying to build a foundation now, to create a financial foundation for my family because of their experience.
Mm. So you said you were about 5 when you came?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was like coming or moving countries?
I have a few distinct memories. One was back in Armenia where food was limited, and so we would stand in line for bread and for chicken. And I just remember asking my mom, "Do they have chicken breast or chicken drumsticks in America? Like, do they have chicken drumsticks in America?" Like that was my thought of America. Like they have way more food than we do here.
Mm,
Um, and I just remember
mhm,
waiting for my luggage to come. I had a few toys that my parents had allowed me to bring. So those are like my earliest memories.
mhm. Yeah, and I loved what you said about like the faith that your parents had coming here. And I mean, it just blows me away every time I hear about people who go through that experience of immigrating and giving up everything they know and all the uncertainty, and how that brought my family here. And, I lived through it rather recently when my husband immigrated here for us to be together in the same country and saw it kind of next to him through his eyes. So it's quite a life experience to immigrate. How did that affect, your relationship with money?
Growing up as an immigrant, and maybe your husband can relate a bit more, it's scarce, right? So you have a scarcity mindset because that's everything is scarce. You don't have money. Money is made to be like the ultimate goal, because you don't have much of it. So we were very careful in how we used electricity around the house. Like you couldn't leave a room without my grandma saying, "Turn off the lights, turn off." And
Mm-hmm.
if you had the water on too long when you're brushing your teeth, turn off the water, because they had these like traumatic experiences of not having enough water, not having enough electricity, um, having barely anything to get by on, being super resourceful. So those skills have carried forward with me today, even though now I'm making well into six figures of income. I still live in that. Sometimes I find myself in that scarcity mindset, and I have to remind myself,
Yeah.
like, I money is a tool. Now I have the money, I can use it as a tool to help me make other parts of my life easier. But it's
Mhm.
hard. It's hard to unwind that scarcity mindset of and another big one for me has been, like, I was an expert saver. I saved a lot of money because I was afraid to spend money, in a way like hoarding money, right? I got to a point where I had over $170,000 in my savings account doing nothing, but then I was afraid to spend it. And at that point, if it wasn't for the FDIC insurance, after like $250,000, they don't insure your deposit. It would still be in a savings account. So it was learning to spend money wisely and not think of it as throwing away money when you're spending it, but how can I spend this money so that it continues to work for me? So those scarcity
Yeah.
mindset thoughts, I think, as an immigrant, and the intergenerational trauma, I think, from them going through the war and through genocide, have stayed with me as their kids and grandkids.
Yeah, I relate to that so much, and I talk about this all the time on the podcast. People are probably sick of hearing it, but for those of you new listeners, like, yeah, I mean, it passes down in generations because my great grandparents went through that. They fled as refugees, also Eastern Europe, fleeing for their lives. And it passed down to, like, exactly what you just said. I remember my dad, freaking out if I left the lights on,
Mhm.
and I've had to also deal with all that scarcity stuff and continue to. And so if you don't actively take steps to work on your relationship with money and money mindset, it's going to keep going down in generations. So it's so important what you're saying.
Yeah, it shows up in like these little habits. Like my dad will not let our car fall below half a tank of gas because I think there were they wouldn't allow they would portion out how much gas was allotted for families. So he still operates under that mindset, and it's just like that habit. If I continue that habit, like, you see how easily it can just continue, and sometimes we don't know why we have these habits.
Yeah, and they bleed over to other things. Like it shows up as just like the gas in the car, but it's like that mentality can extend to everything and it can hold you back from, in your example you just gave, like using that money that was sitting in a bank account to invest it and grow it more, or to make an impact on the world or whatever, do stuff for your family. So yeah, it really bleeds into the
Yes.
subconscious.
Yes, and you don't need to have a cushion for a rainy day. I always think of the absolute worst case scenario, and like, no, maybe I should think of the absolute best case scenario, and
Hmm.
invest this money in that way, and hope for that absolute best case.
Yeah. So, how did this lead to you where you are now, with Everyday Finance Gal?
I have a 12-year-old daughter, and for me, I think it was just these passing thoughts of things that I've learned along the way. I work in corporate finance, so I work with a lot of, um, for better or worse, like rich people. Most of them don't look like me. And so it's taken me a lot of questioning and seeing how other people live, to help shape my money habits. And so I wanted a place to memorialize these tips that have worked for me as far as budgeting and, being careful with my money, but also tips that have started to help for me as far as investing and having a 401k and making sure I know how to invest that and what the max is, and to find out what the fees are, like little things I didn't know about. I really wanted to memorialize it on my page, mostly for my daughter, and my sister is in her late 20s, and we didn't learn any of this in school, and I just find that if you see it on somebody's Instagram page, it's easier to listen to than if your mom is telling you or if your sister is,
So
it's
true.
it kind of, validates it in a way. And what I found was a lot of people, it resonated with a lot of people. A lot of people enjoyed and learned from these things. So it's just been an awesome way to grow this community, from a couple hundred to now 45,000. As of today, actually, I hit 45,000.
Wow, congratulations. That's
Thanks.
awesome. Yeah. So, okay, that's really inspiring. I would love to hear more about, your views in particular on finance when it comes to immigrants. You obviously have so much wisdom to share that's resonated with a lot of people. But yeah, specifically like for the immigrant community, what would you want to tell people about finances?
I think knowledge is, the biggest thing. I would encourage people to spend some time learning, whether it's books or webinars, but just really exposing yourself to just the simple phrases of finance, where I think the world wants us to think it's so challenging. Like, this is so scary. Hire a financial advisor to help you. And maybe you can later, right? But when we're starting off, I think learning, the simple terms of what interest rates are, right? And looking at your own finances, I would highly recommend anybody to go look back at last month's spending and see exactly where your money went. That was a big, like, brain pop, like, moment for
Yeah.
me, where I thought I was spend it's like that thing where they say, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. It's the same with the budget. Like, show me where your money went and I'll show you where your priorities are. So that your spending is going to tell you where your priorities are. So I would really encourage everybody to figure out how much money is leaving their account every month, as well as figuring out how much money they're earning every month. Because the first step that I always encourage, people to do is try to reduce certain expenses that you might not need. But ultimately, the best way to grow your wealth is find ways to increase your income. So in
Absolutely
Immigrant,
agree.
where we have this hustle mentality and we work hard, let's channel those forces to things that we can, um, grow our income. So I would say that would be my first recommendation.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel like everything comes back to just increased income, because even if you learn to budget perfectly, which it's worth learning to manage money. Like, if you just increase income and don't learn how to manage money, you're not going to be better off. But
Mhm.
once you learn to manage money, like increasing income is what needs to happen because, there's only so much you can do if that total number in your budget stays the same.
Yes. And also, just because you increase your income doesn't mean you'll get any better at spending money. And so I think that's why it goes hand in hand. It's important to know how you're spending so that when you are making more money, you can figure out, like, okay, you know what? I want to allocate this percentage to, you know, invest or savings, or this percentage to discretionary things that that make me feel good.
Yeah,
Because unfortunately,
absolutely.
it's not osmosis. The more money we make doesn't mean we become better at handling money.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about this idea you have of channeling that hard work ethic that immigrants have
Yeah.
specifically into increasing income? And I'm guessing what you mean by that, and I want to hear more, is like, let's not just channel it into working for someone else, right?
Yes.
And working like 3 jobs and working yourself to the bone. So, what do you mean by channeling it toward increasing income? And how can you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is when I had to unlearn and relearn too. It's because I put 120% in everything I do. And I realized, like, I need to prioritize that better. And my daughter, so she's trying to raise money. And so she was thinking, like, hey, what if I wash the car? Would you pay me $10 or $20 for this? And my sister and I were talking to her, and we're like, why don't you think about things you can create to sell to make money versus transferring your time to make money, right? Like, I'm trying to have her think of creating versus working, because creating is more scalable. I
Yeah,
don't know if I
that's
explained
right.
that right. So I encourage her to create art. So she paints, and then we sell that for her, and so she gets empowered because she's creating something. She's excited because it's like her mini business in a way.
That's so
But
cool.
but it's also a way that she can scale it herself, and not transferring her or trading her time for money is what I'm trying to teach her.
Mm. That is incredible. And that's such a good segue to what I really, really am excited to talk to you about, which is motherhood and money. Some of you listening may have heard me mention time to time, I have a young daughter, Mao, and I have an almost 2-year-old. And she's a big part of our life. I don't
Mhm.
talk too much about her in immigrant finance, I kind of keep it private. But, this is a very important topic of how you relate to finances as a mother. And I'm excited to hear that example you gave. It was very concrete of like how to start teaching that concept of not trading time for money while your kids are young. We have a lot of listeners who are mothers and fathers. So yeah, would love to hear more about your thoughts on this topic of motherhood and money.
Yes, it's one of my favorite topics, and I try to think of what I did wrong and or right and transition it to being a mother. So one thing that I didn't have growing up was a 529 plan, right? Or an investing account to help my parents pay for college. I had student debt. So something as you're becoming a mother and or a parent, and thinking about the future expenses for your child, starting an investing account or an education account might be something to consider. So those are things that I'm trying to do differently, right? Like learning from things I didn't have for my daughter. But all of those tactics I think are great. But I always want to make sure we take a step back and think, one, it's like that airplane example of making sure we put the face mask on us before we put it for our kids, right? So making sure our money and financial habits are sound before we focus on theirs. So that's the one thing I want to add as a background. But the second thing, I think, beyond having these like investment accounts for kids, I think educating kids on money, educating kids on expenses and spending money, earning money, donating money, are key. So I want to make sure, even if I don't leave a dime for my daughter, I want to make sure she has the financial education. So for all the moms I know, I just want to encourage them to think about the financial education part for kids. So one way I do that in my household is I I talk about us being stewards of money. That this in our household as Christians, we think that we view money as not ours; it's given from God. Our abilities, our skills are from God as well. So we need to be good stewards and put them to use. So we divide money in three buckets. So you can save it for yourself for the future. You could spend it on something you love, or you can give it or donate it to somebody else. So we made little buckets like that, and those can start at early age, right? Like 3 to 4. And then as you get older, you might teach them to do some chores potentially for money. Or instead of chores for my daughter who's 12, I encourage her to create art. And so anytime she's creating or reading a book or doing a physical activity outside, I reward her with a couple dollars. So using daily activities and yourself as an example to teach kids about money, I think is the best way.
I'm so curious, how did you sort of land on this approach? Did you do like a lot of research, or is it more intuitive?
Which part? Which part of the?
Just like how you've designed this approach with your daughter of teaching her about money.
The biblical stewardship, I just use the Bible for the wisdom in Proverbs. So the book of Proverbs talks a lot about money. And then I think as you look at your own life and the stuff that we're spending on, we could split it up into buckets, right? Either we're spending money, we're saving money, or we're giving away money, or I'd like to give away money to others. So I tried to make it a simpler process for her to think about.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Has there been anything surprising or unexpected in your journey of teaching your daughter about money?
That's a good question. In the beginning, I think she was all about spending money, which was great, right? Because you can still spend money within the confines of this. And it was just like, okay, so you got $10 for Christmas, so let's put $2 in this bucket to donate, and let's put $5 in this bucket to save, and then $3 to spend. So now you know how much you can spend. So she would immediately buy Fortnite, like the V-Bucks. I don't know if you're familiar with the Roblox and Fortnite. She would just spend every dollar she had in the beginning. But what happened was, as she saw her savings account grow, it was easier for her to save, because then she was like, well, I don't want to buy these V-Bucks because I want to save for a computer. So it was
Momentum.
it was interesting to see, and I to teach kind of the compound interest, I started adding interest to her. Like we use an Excel spreadsheet, so it was a way to teach her how to
Wow.
use Excel. And the only other cool thing I saw from somebody else was, like, I told her, I'll double your money on your birthday. So it was even more.
Ah.
um, but she spent
So
like
cool.
$100 before her birthday, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because this could have been 200." But she's
Oh,
like,
you
"No."
double what she has in savings?
Yes. So, but she ended up spending $100 on like this big package in Fortnite, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this? Like literally next week is your birthday. You're gonna double it." And she's like, "No, you're gonna double it, so it doesn't even matter." So you know what I mean? Like you're trying to teach these habits, but they think of it differently. So it's always interesting to see their point of view of, like, I'm thinking you'll have 200 next week, and she's thinking I could spend 100 and I'll still double the rest of the money, Like, um,
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
so
This is
Fortnite has a lot of our money. Fortnite, yeah.
this is making me excited to teach our daughter about money. My mind is immediately going to like, how do you teach them to not have scarcity mindset? Any
Because
lessons on that?
Yeah, I think you have to encourage the spending. You have to encourage the
Okay.
spending and donating, because it's
Okay.
okay to spend money, because we've already established a rule of this much you can spend, because we've already prioritized the savings, right? So we already know you're saving enough. And so
Hmm.
it's okay to spend this money. Um,
Is so incredibly profound. I don't know if you realize.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I work with so many people in the immigrant community who are on one end of the spectrum or the other. Either
Yes,
it's way overspending, not having any
yes,
control about where the money's going, or way hoarding and being in constant
yes,
fear of not having enough, or somewhere in the middle, right?
yes.
And I I tend to fall more on the afraid of spending side of things.
Mhm,
Like
mhm.
I've been doing so much work recently on undoing that subconscious scarcity mindset, and like a lot of it just comes down to spend more money, with good planning and all of that, and knowing where your money's going and managing it, with all of that intentionally. But like, yeah, spending is important.
Yeah, and spending it on things that bring you joy, like value-based
Exactly.
spending, things that are going to make you happy. We just went on a trip to Hawaii and we didn't really like budget anything. We just went and enjoyed our time.
Yeah,
But I think when you develop good money habits, you don't need to track as often because those skills
that's
kind
right.
of a muscle it builds. But when I think about spending, and I would agree with you, Adina, like for me too, spending has been the hardest to unlearn
Mhm.
or to
Mhm.
relearn.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to think of it as I'm buying back time. I hadn't had house cleaners in a while, and so I spent on house cleaners coming, which during COVID, their livelihood was reduced, right? There, not a lot
Yeah.
of people were. So it was a way for me to give back to them, but also they came when I was working. So it was like a real life example of me working for 4 hours and my house being clean for 4 hours. So now I bought back 4 hours of time on a Saturday that now I can spend with my daughter. So I'm
We
trying to,
literally Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh yeah. So I'm just trying to think of it that way of like,
Yeah.
what's the point of working and having money if I can't enjoy things or buy use it as a way to buy back time?
We literally just had that experience. We just started having cleaners help support us, for similar reasons, and it's really tied to our motherhood conversation because
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much work 6 days a week. I, have a full time job as a lawyer. I do immigrant finance as well, and so Saturdays are my day with my daughter. And I was finding that I was spending most of the day cleaning, and
Yeah.
we'd make it fun. And she like loves it, playing with the stuff and all that. And she's learning, she's learning to like push the little Swifter, which is great.
Yeah.
But, there's other things I could be doing with my one day off to enjoy time with my daughter. That's a better use of time. And like you said, there's people who need that money, right? And
Yes.
so it's like, it was so hard for me as I was for so long so drilled into like, making sure every dollar has a purpose and budgeting and not spending things you don't need to spend money on. But you have to unlearn that, like you said, and see it as like, this is an investment in myself. This is an investment in the community, right? This is an investment in my time with my daughter, with my
Mhm.
family.
Yeah, and I think there are different phases in our lives where certain mindset shifts serve us more than others. So if I'm really struggling to earn money, then maybe it's not wise for me to spend money to have my house clean. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. But if I don't have the money, then I might reconsider. But if I have the
Yeah.
money, then why not use it? Again, try to think of money as a tool to help. And again, like we said, you're paying it forward. You're helping another family too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I have a client who I've been helping start her cleaning business, and I've been so inspired by her and like how much joy she gets from doing her work and helping
Yes.
people, right? And just thinking a lot about how like having things clean and decluttered also really helps your money mindset as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, anyway, I'm going on a tangent with cleaning now. So back to the motherhood stuff. Is there anything else you want to kind of add what you learned on that subject?
Yeah, I think another thing I'd add is I learned about protecting my assets when I became a mother, and not just became a mother, but when I bought my house. Because if we think about worst case scenarios, which I work in finance, so sometimes that's where my mind goes. But if anything were to happen to us, do we have any assets that we don't want the and you might know this better than me, right? Like the city or the probate court to allocate to our family. And so I created a living trust
Hmm.
so that my assets are in one place and I could tell the court or whomever where and how I want my money distributed amongst my family. So,
Mm.
really protecting assets with a living trust and a will was something that
Yeah.
I did a couple years ago. Looking into term insurance, again, just figuring out how much debt you have and making sure your family is taken care of, like that next step. Um, I did that like 2 years ago. So my daughter is still young, but you kind of project out, right? Like maybe up
Yeah.
until she's 18, she's going to have college fund costs. So how much money would she need if I were, unfortunately, something were to happen to me? So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'd say. And then another thing I've learned is to ask for help. I find that asking my parents childcare for help with childcare is another mindset shift I'd have to take because I don't know about you and if your family is nearby, but I enjoy the opportunity to serve people and help people. But when I need something, I feel like it's a burden to ask for help. Um,
Yeah.
so as a single mom, as somebody who's trying to be better with money and ask and have my finances in order, but also have my mental health okay. I think it's important for us, especially as immigrants, to ask for help.
Yep.
So that's the final thought. Maybe I'd leave.
I agree with that. And that's something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about too lately is like working on receiving. And I found that a lot of folks we work with, that is a growth area because, like, especially women and especially
Mhm.
moms, you're so used to giving everything all the time to everybody, to your family, to your kids. Especially in many immigrant communities where it's very like collective
Mhm.
culture, you know, it's a lot, it's a big burden to carry. And so to work on receiving can actually be very uncomfortable, but it can also help your money flow as well because, if you're not letting yourself receive love and support and all that, sometimes it's hard to receive money.
Yeah, and it's kind of like delegating tasks. Delegating tasks for me have been challenging. So this is something that has helped me delegate better. You're delegating certain tasks to other people so you can again prioritize your energy on things that only you can do. Because maybe
Yeah.
other people can wash dishes and help dust the house, but only you can create this presentation to present to a group of investors or whomever, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or you are the only one who can be there to have time with your daughter as her
Yes,
mother.
yes,
To bring it
exactly.
full circle. Yeah. Well, these have been such amazing insights that you've shared. I think you've already given a lot of like probably number one lessons that people need to hear on finance. But is there one in particular for the immigrant community or for mothers in the immigrant community that you would really want to highlight as like your number one piece of advice or lesson?
I think it would be to learn about investing and not
Yeah.
just think about saving as the way to go. My mom is 55 and she just opened up a Roth IRA this year.
Congrats.
Yeah, and so
Mm.
learning about the tax benefits of certain things, um, and in her mind, investing is super risky, which it
Mhm.
is, but there are ways to invest, and I think it's important for us in the immigrant community to learn about these because historically access to this information has not been readily available, and now it's everywhere. You can go on YouTube, on Instagram. Um, and find information on investing. So please look into ways that you can invest to grow your money.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Everyday Finance Gal. Where can people find, follow, and support you?
Thank you so much. You can find me on Instagram at everydayfinancegal or everydayfinancegal.com, and that will have all my info. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. If you found me here, please do DM me. I read all my DMs.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Immigrant Finance Show. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already and leave us a review so we can reach more people to help. Also, did you know we started a free Facebook group for immigrant families who want to build generational wealth? We're doing free monthly trainings covering everything from investing to online business. Plus, you will be in there with a network of other inspiring members of our community. Make sure to join us at facebook.com/groups/immigrant finance, and we'll see you there.